Everybody, you are listening to Nate Jones on this episode of House of Strauss. Nate is an NBA agent. He is an entrepreneur. For full disclosure, lest I be accused of conflict of interest, I'm a minor investor in Move Insoles, your company. And you are also, you are just out there with your opinions, man. I mean, this is part of the reason you're on the program, is that you, more so than other people, will be very honest about your thoughts on culture, your thoughts on politics, your thoughts on sports business, which is one of the reasons we're having you on. Listener, get that mental PTI scroll in your head. We will be discussing inside the NBA, possibly ending because Turner is losing rights to the NBA. We will be discussing what Nate is talking about right there, which is how ESPN is presenting the NBA product, and anything else that we might want to discuss currently, including confronting Nate with some of his honest tweets. But let's start there, man. Because I think, was I incorrect? Am I incorrect in saying that you were commenting on the way ESPN is presenting the NBA?
Yeah, it's just in the DNA of what ESPN does since the Mark Shapiro era. Mark Shapiro obviously is what is he, COO of Endeavor now?
I didn't follow the various machinations of his career post ESPN, but yeah, big major figure at ESPN, somebody who went to war with David Stern actually over the WNBA of all things. And even if he is not there, he has left a legacy, as you are saying.
Yeah, he was like ESPN's anointed whiz kid, and basically the guy that came up with the debate show format. And which, this was Cold Pizza launched in 2001, I believe, 2001, 2002. And it's, 2024. And the format has, stayed for 20 years. And if anything, it's gotten stronger and infiltrated more and more of what ESPN does. And I think it's an interesting comparison between what NBA fans are looking for and what ESPN as an entity is looking to do, where you're getting debates and trade rumors during a national broadcast instead of actual hype, preparation, and storytelling about the players, the teams, the game, the rivalry itself, and even going to a degree to make Stephen A. himself, the king of the debate at ESPN, the feature topic about a particular game that's going on, which just happened with New York versus Indiana, because Stephen A. is obviously a very, very big Knicks fan.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me how corporations operate in this way. I've made the analogy to how at Nike they missed on Steph Curry because they've got a model. Their model was Michael Jordan. That's their model for success. And that's an athletic wingman, swingman, whatever. And Steph Curry was not that. And so they could not see behind or see beyond what their model was. And Stephen A. has become that for ESPN because he is tremendously talented, charismatic, and as Charles Barkley has said, he's on the TV when I fall asleep and he's on the TV when I wake up. So he is just all over. And it makes sense that he's become the sort of star that he has become. But ultimately what happens, since he has become their Michael Jordan and he has been the head of this successful model of debate shows, I'm sure First Take made them a lot of money. It's very cheap to put on. The issue is that everything just becomes reflective of that. It's almost like the paperclip problem with AI, where the AI will malfunction and just assume it needs to make everything into paperclips. You've got a TV sports presentation, a game, something people feel just emotional about and have a connection to and have watched with their parents. And, there's this continuum with it, and it gets turned into debate, paperclip, or it gets turned into a debate in this instance. And I felt it was interesting to me that Game 7 was such a seminal moment, because I get annoyed with things. I get annoyed with the way these things are presented on occasion, but I don't necessarily believe other people care so much. People just want the games. That's what matters. That's why, and we'll talk about it later, that's why the NBA is okay giving the heave ho to Turner and to Inside the NBA, despite all that, mutual success and branding and everything else. It's about the money and it's about the live rights. But this was a big deal. That Game 7 where they talked 99% Knicks and it revolved around Stephen A. Man, were you surprised by the backlash to it, or is that something that was just obvious to you that was going to cause that backlash? And do you think they're going to change because of it?
I don't think they're going to change. Your earlier comment about Charles Barkley, seeing Stephen A. when he wakes up and when he goes to sleep. When does Stephen A. sleep? I want to know.
Well, it's in the office.
and I'm also wondering, because he's got his separate Stephen A. show. Does he lease office space, or studio space from ESPN for his separate studio show, so he doesn't have to go somewhere else? Because otherwise, I'm like, this guy's day has to be absolutely impossible.
I might be wrong about this. Spike Eskin would have the true details. Yeah. I think that space might be at WFAN, where he's producing his podcast and giving his takes. Now, from what I hear behind the scenes, Pat McAfee's success really lit a fire under Stephen A. Because,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, Stephen A. notices the money that they pay McAfee. I don't know if I believe all the reports about the money. It's a little bit like one of those NFL contracts where I don't know how much of this is real and how much of this is some sort of miasma of maybe potentially. But that's something that he was highly aware of. And then he could see the independence that McAfee had in having his own podcast platform. And then the other guy who I think has inspired Stephen A. is Shannon Sharp, because Shannon Sharp's podcast is just this tremendous success. And so it's funny how he is trying to build this independence from ESPN inside of ESPN while helping ESPN, while ESPN undermines itself while trying to be too much like him and revolve around him, this one guy.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I actually think Stephen A. outside of sports is really entertaining.
Oh yeah,
I think he
it's
does have
Stephen A.
I think he does have a chance to like break through like that, but he is ESPN 7 days a week, so it's hard to do both things concurrently. But he's trying. But your question about if I was surprised if by the backlash, I wasn't necessarily anticipating it. But I think they went a little too over the top. And the fact that the Knicks got their ass kicked, I think also just elevated that a little bit. It's like you're talking, it's a Game 7. Both teams have a chance. They just, they had lost, 3 of the last 4 games beforehand, right? So why are we all Knicks all the time here? I was excited for the MSG game, all of that stuff. But given those circumstances, I'm not surprised that we had that backlash.
Well, it almost seems like it's the malfunction in AI that they over apply an insight or an understanding. Are there more New York Knicks fans than Indiana Pacers fans? Yes. There were over 1 million
100%.
people in the local market of New York City watching that game. But those people, I think, want the Pacers to be a worthy antagonist. That's what makes it matter more and mean more. If those presentations of those Knicks Pacers games told us nothing about Reggie Miller and the Davis brothers, then they just would have felt less special. And obviously they were special because Tyrese Halliburton is wearing the shirt with Reggie Miller doing the choke sign afterwards. So I think it's just an incorrect assessment to just max out and optimize to that degree. It's almost like a misapplication of analytics that we talk about. This idea of if you know that your slider is your best pitch, I'm just going to throw the slider 95% of the time. No, that's a bad idea. You need it mixed in with something else to make it really pop and to make it really special. So I think it just shows they don't really know what they're doing. It shows that I think David Roberts, who's the executive who has risen concurrently with Stephen A. It's almost like Lynn Merritt is the LeBron James as David Roberts is to Stephen A. Smith. It's a deep cut for you sneaker industry heads right there. But he's a guy who was aligned with Stephen A. from the early days. And as Stephen A. has gained power, his rabbi, as they used to say in The Wire, David Roberts has gained power. But David Roberts, used to that radio world, used to that debate show world. And that's a different world than trying to be the Dick Enberg of ESPN's NBA production. And so maybe none of this matters, Nate. That's another question. Does any of this matter? You know, all this matter is really the games. That's all that matters. They're paying the NBA a ton of money to put on those games. And this is all just for cultural critics like ourselves who really deeply care. And this is all just on the periphery. Or does this matter? And ESPN needs to actually change for the sake of, I don't know, saving the league.
It sounds like the NBA is signing an 11-year media rights deal, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's a long marriage.
So it's really not about, like, you have this push and pull between media rights and you know, that's where the NBA makes its bread and butter, right? You have that push and pull between that and what's actually making the NBA culturally relevant, what builds fans, what acquires and engages fans, all those things, versus what is going on in the media landscape. The media landscape is we're in the long tail era of media. There are few things that still aggregate audiences, right? Like the NBA is not like the NFL at all, not anything close to that, but it's still something where you can get millions of people to watch at the same time, which is just rare in this day and age. So the NBA is able to take advantage of that. You've got various players that have various reasons for why they want to bid on the NBA. And the NBA is still able, I guess they're going to be tripling their rights deal. And which that's one thing, but then you have the other side of it where it's like, do people still love the sport at the same level that they did before? And are you continuing to build that cultural reverence and build fans and get people that want to teach their kids about this and all of that? Or is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as they keep cutting checks. Who cares, right?
If I'm Adam Silver, my job is done. I feel like my job is done. I can retire. I got the money. That was my prerogative. But theoretically, it's someone's job to grow the league beyond it. I thought the timing was interesting. I'm not making any accusations here. I think that Andrew Marchand, who wrote critically about ESPN's NBA presentation in The Athletic, and John Lewis in Sports Media Watch, who wrote critically about the presentation of the NBA and ESPN, I think they could have easily had that happen and come to those conclusions independent of the timing. But if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, you might go, I wonder if the NBA is talking to people in media now that the ink is dry, now that the contracts are agreed to, and going, what the hell is with our partner? They need to get their shit in order. Maybe they weren't happy having those conversations earlier when that might, I don't know, shake things up a bit. Unlike TNT, ESPN, I don't think needs the NBA. They want the NBA. I don't think they need the NBA. Turner and Warner Brothers actually needed the NBA. Ironically, their CEO said that he didn't need the NBA, which might be why they don't have the NBA. But ESPN, I think that's with somebody that's a partner the NBA wanted to keep happy. So it's very interesting timing-wise to see their coverage getting blown apart in mainstream publications right after the deal is done. If that's the case, then I say, well done, NBA. Good job. I mean, it shows you still care about your product. You're shaking your head. You don't buy this conspiracy theory.
No, I'm shaking my head because I'm like, man, I didn't think about that. That's actually something that's very feasible. That, you know, we don't talk about the problems we have with our partner until the ink is dried, so we have some leverage here. Because, you know, the thing I was thinking about before you started giving that theory is just how come the NFL studio shows don't have that? Is it because the NFL has the power to say ESPN keep the debate away from our pregame show, our postgame show, all of that stuff? Or what do you think in that regard?
Yeah, I think that you can just more easily find an audience for nuts and bolts. I think it's really hard. The NBA, the NBA is something that everybody thinks they know, even if they don't. People who watch the sport and don't even know that there's this thing called hand signals that the coach uses, still believe that they've got an exact sense of who's good, who's bad, who's overrated, who's underrated. With the NFL, there's more of a sense of, okay, Rex Ryan, can you explain this mystery to me that I'm not aware of? What is the cornerback supposed to do in press man coverage? And since there's more of an appetite for the NFL in general, it's just a bigger deal. You can have that kind of show. And they've just found the right personnel, it seems. The NBA, I think, it's very easy for people in NBA Twitter to sort of to lament the things the NBA and ESPN don't do. And I share some of that a lot of the time. But there's a reason for it. There's a reason for the Lakers getting all these national TV games.
Yeah.
It's that twice as many people watch those games as the small market teams. Now, they come back at you and they go, look, well, that's just going to continue to happen if you don't feature those teams and give them spotlight. I agree, but it's hard to take that risk and to sacrifice that money in the short term on your way to it. By the way, as an aside, it's nice how many people were watching Nuggets Wolves, because it seems like despite the market size, that was a very popular series. But I just think it's easier for the NFL to do it. It's not just a matter of ESPN being conscientious with the NFL and not conscientious with the NBA. I also just think it's a matter of it's easier to be conscientious than it is with the NBA, where it's just a little more difficult to get people in the door unless it's a very lower brow, if you will, debate between who's the best player, that sort of thing.
Yeah, two things popped in my head when you were speaking. Number one, I think the problem with basketball is everyone's played basketball and everyone thinks the NBA is like pickup basketball. So just like, I don't need, I know how, Rudy Gobert sucks because he can't guard Jokic, right? Like that's the general, random fan that's watching a game. That's what they see versus like, why is Rudy Gobert 4-time defensive player of the year? There's a very valid reason why he's that. So you have that aspect. So I can see the hesitancy in trying to explain things to people. Whereas in football, people know they don't know anything at all. Even though there's probably, some parallels there between the NBA and the NFL in terms of knowledge for sure. We just assume, or at least fans assume
quarterbacks are the NBA of the NFL. Why are they always debating quarterbacks on all these talk shows? It's because the quarterback is the guy people feel like they've got a right to have an opinion on. And they go, yeah, of course. Like that guy sucks. He's overrated. I saw him throw it to the other team. I mean, I saw that did happen versus I don't think they're that confident about these other positions that are a little bit off camera, but the quarterback is the one that is a little bit like arguing NBA superstars where people, and really the same rules should apply to quarterback because there's so much that's happening out there that we don't even know about. But I think that's one of the reasons for the difference in how it's covered. But yeah, I think ESPN is just kind of crass. It just is. I'm not trying to be mean about it. And there are exceptions. Mike Breen, incredible play-by-play guy, just top tier, the best. And I could come up with other examples of good stuff out of ESPN, but when Monday Night Football traded places with Sunday Night Football and NBC was in charge of Sunday Night Football, it looked beautiful and glorious and important and cool. And the product at ESPN for Monday Night Football just felt like cable TV. And maybe this will lead us to the next conversation piece, which is inside the NBA is dead. That's my take. It's dead. And it is dead even if, as you have posited, it moves to some other place, even if Amazon or whatever takes it over, because the reports are today that Warner Brothers, Turner, they've been boxed out of the negotiations. They will not have NBA rights after this next season. And I don't know if you get it quite the same if you get the guys back. I'd love to have the guys back. I'd love to have Chuck and Ernie and Kenny and Shaq, and that's cool. But it's not going to be the same because there's a little bit to the podunk nature of cable that never really went away. And even when it was making a lot of money, it always felt a little bit like just not the grandeur of the main networks. And that kind of allowed the vibe to be what it was. And I believe that's getting taken from us no matter what, but it's also why we're losing it. Warner Brothers, they're kind of a pure cable channel sort of operation along with HBO. They don't have an anchor to windward with a network like NBC does. And like ESPN does. And so what we're lamenting right now, what I'm eulogizing is losing the guys and losing inside the NBA, but also just kind of losing that informal, casual authenticity that I'm not sure is going to exist beyond this moment.
Yeah, man. When you're speaking, I was thinking, does Warner have any stake in the CW? That would be funny if Zasloff was like, "Yeah, we'll put some playoff games on the CW." That's like as an enticing like piece, or are they completely divested from that?
I would have to check. I'd have to check the holdings and the rules.
But yeah, I think you're right in a lot of ways about cable being folksy, and especially they're looked at as Warner networks now, but they're Turner networks, and the Turner networks were a reflection of a super folksy guy, Ted Turner himself, right? Like you think rootin' tootin' when you hear Ted Turner, and like
he was like one of the Wildcatters, like Jerry Jones, only he struck oil in the sky with satellites, is what it felt like. Like, yeehaw! I just found this.
Exactly. And then you've got a guy like Ernie Johnson that is like, he's folksy and down home, and Charles Barkley is in a lot of ways. I always have a theory: people with Southern accents or country accents they are much more approachable than someone that seems formal and whatever else. And people love Chuck. And that's kind of what you've gotten with that show. The question for me, even if they keep it around, is it Turner going to be producing it? It sounds like Ernie Johnson doesn't want to go work for anyone else, and he doesn't want to go shoot a show anywhere else. So if it was going to stay together and he was going to be the host, I think ideally it would probably have to be shot in Atlanta, and it would have to be one of these situations where Turner was actually producing it. In that instance, maybe you get the same show because it's the same studio, the same staff, everything's happening. And all it is after the game, they cut over to Inside the NBA and they give their follow-up on it. Might be a little too clunky to pull that off, but I think it is possible to pull off.
How do you, I know I want to have the business conversation, but how do you feel about it emotionally, Nate? You are an NBA guy. You love the league. You love this show. I mean, I'm not asking you to cry for me.
No, but definitely not. Definitely not gonna shed a tear. But this is like, I mean, this is the process of any like fandom. Things come and go. I loved NBA on NBC. It enhanced my fandom, and I am not of the belief that NBA on NBC coming back is going to feel the same way it did in the Costas era, Costas, Dick Ebersol era of NBA on NBC, Michael Jordan era, all those things. So it's things change, things come and go. It's a part of it. And also these guys get older. Chuck could wake up one day and say, I don't want to do this anymore. Right. Ernie could say, I don't want to do this anymore. Any of these guys could change their, key players could change their mind. So it was inevitable that it was going to end. I definitely enjoy it. And this next year, I think they're going to get a lot of flowers. It might be a little bit over the top, especially if the show isn't continuing on with another partner. We're going to pay tribute to them the whole time, which is going to be nice.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's cable, it feels like a vestige of the old monoculture that's being taken from us, where they wouldn't just talk about basketball. There were cultural events like Chuck joking about Jussie Smollett, and whatever else was happening. And it's sad. And it's bittersweet, maybe, because you ultimately want things to end before they get bad. It's hard for me to envision how it would, but these guys are older.
It's like Marv Albert.
Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. The Dick Stocktonification of Marv Albert was rough. But yeah, that did change a little bit of my connection to Albert, hearing years of him not be himself. That's my most recent memory of him doing what he does. So I think it's good when you leave them wanting a little bit more. And so maybe it would be good that it's wrapping up. But no, I hate that it's being taken away. I love the show. I'm totally against the people in NBA Twitter who complain about it. And I'm trying to remember. I felt a little bad. Robert Silverman said it was a bad show. I can't completely reproduce whatever the tweet was, and he was getting crushed. And I mean, I think his take is insane, but the internet, there's no sense of proportionality with the internet, where somebody who deserves maybe a little bit of shit will just get buried by it. But no, it's
the pile on. People love it. It's
the pile on. You've just got a special combination of characters, and Charles Barkley is just one of the funniest celebrities to have ever existed. And yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but I do see it as Chuck and Ernie as being these truly special, can't replicate them talents who made this thing sing. And then also Kenny Smith and Shaq having roles to play, if you will.
Yeah, I think 100% it's the stars themselves. Chuck is just, someone that is so personable, so funny. People just generally love him. Chuck could tell you he slapped your mom and you still would be like, oh, that's funny, Chuck. I can't believe you did that. Right. Like he's one of those characters. Right.
I mean, I've heard stories, seen Chuck partying with media members saying just wild stuff. And I'm doing the thing right now. I'm going, well, should I talk about that? Or is that going to be aggregated if I talk about it? We'll have to paywall. But stuff where just the stuff he gets away with. I'll tell. Okay, I can tell this story because I think it just shows the Chuckness of Chuck and the being so wrong, but everybody being delighted by it. In Oklahoma City, he was partying with media members at that Sheraton Hotel, and there was a wedding there, and he just became part of just the wedding almost, and buying everything for the bride and the groom, and just being the life of the party, and they're so happy. And then he leans over to one of the media members and he says about the bride, "You see later, she'll knock on my room door. She'll be in my room."
But he wasn't serious. But it's just
I would like to think that he didn't mean it, but that's the sort of thing that he can do, and we all laugh and go, "Oh, Chuck." Where if Isaiah Thomas did that, you're like, "This fucking snake," It's just a different thing.
It's crazy. It's just like how Michael Jordan. Everyone knows MJ is an asshole. Right? Like it's just his personality. He's a killer, whatever else. But people like him. They don't like him. They love him. So he can be anything he wants, and he's going to be beloved. Charles Barkley is in that category of people. Right. And I feel like those folks are really, obviously there's things anyone can do where they're going to be there. They can ruin their lives, but the degree to where they can go, it's a special circumstance. They're like these vestiges of monoculture that still remain. The guys that are just you can't chop them down, and that's kind of what you experience there. But the other thing I was going to say about Turner, it's obvious that their production crew is special, and the reason I say that is I feel like we've seen so many things. I've experienced it in my line of business, from like dealing with brands trying to do commercials in an authentic way, production teams trying to do shows in authentic ways. And they come off corny and cheesy and forced. And there has to be something there's some secret sauce there beyond just the talent, but the actual production crew and how they approach things and the way they think about things and the type of people that they hire. There's a secret sauce there that has allowed them to produce that show. Like, it's very obvious versus we know what the fabric of ESPN is. It's debate and rumors, right? Transactions, debate, rumors, and that's their fabric. And that's the reason everything looks like that and feels like that.
Definitely. It's underappreciated. Production matters. Coming up with the format of PTI matters as much as the unique personalities of Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon. In the case of Turner, I've cited this example of brilliant production. To me, it's a big deal. To others, I don't know. But people forget that when Shaq joined the show, he was not good.
Yeah, it was awkward.
They were getting crushed. It was not good. And what I think allowed Shaq to thrive on Inside the NBA and for them to really just get their footing and get momentum was one of those producers back there coming up with one of those producers coming up with Shaqtin' a Fool.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't know how they came up with it, but I could imagine that it went like this. Okay, what does Shaq do? What does he like to do? What is he good at? Well, he's kind of a middle school bully, if we're being real about it. I mean, he's a lovable middle school bully, but he's a middle school bully. What if we gave him a blooper reel where he can just make fun of the players who screwed up? And we'll give it a catchy title. That allowed Shaq to get comfortable, and then he kind of eased into whatever rapport he had with the other guys, threatening to fight Chuck threatening to fight him. And since that point, it's like he's always been there now. You know, we almost forget about the pre-Shaq days now. That's production. I don't think, unless they come up with stuff like that, you don't get people in their proper roles. They can't really show you what they can do. It's very similar to coaching and players.
Yeah, I mean, I think once they got him, I think when he first got on the show, he was trying to compete with Chuck. And now it feels like, oh, I have my own little space. And then also I'm comfortable being Chuck's hype man. He's the best Charles Barkley hype man. He's the best Charles Barkley.
Chuck? What was it again, Chuck? What was it again?
And he makes it, his hype man act with Chuck makes it funnier. Like he knows how we all are going to react. He's like Ed McMahon for Charles Barkley.
Yeah.
Like,
what kind of women they have in San Antonio, Chuck? It's so good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I'm fascinated by the idea of just this authenticity, because some of what we're saying, and we talked earlier about the Pat McAfee show influencing Stephen A. Smith, somebody might say, well, that's authenticity. McAfee is challenging his bosses to get him out of there, and he's being real, and he's being informal, and he's saying fuck, and he's doing his thing. But I don't know. It's just not the same thing to me. I feel like whatever that is just not whatever it is on TNT. And I think part of that, it's a little bit of a pre-Twitter people whose sense of whether they're doing well or poorly is informed by stuff that's not social media. They fundamentally appear more authentic to us than anybody after that. And I wrote this down because I was wondering if you got some blowback or maybe some people saying I'm similar. You randomly tweeted in response to another tweet, Bill Maher is a classic liberal, aka a normie, which I consider myself, and that doesn't fit in the online discourse. We do have differences. I'm not in the anti-religion boat, but I see the value if it's not on the extremes. But overall, he's a pretty tame dude. Shrug emoji. I might have read that a little bit incorrectly. I apologize if I screwed up some syntax, but I think there's something to that in general, where Bill Maher is somebody I often find myself not agreeing with a take of his.
Same.
I see people get very angry at him, but I believe him when he says that this is my honest perspective. I believe that what he is telling me is what he actually believes. whether I agree with it or not. Incidentally, I don't necessarily feel that way about Jon Stewart, but that's a different conversation. And I think that the characters inside the NBA are similar, where they're men of a certain age, and they just they're not controlled by that kind of feedback. That even if I regard myself as a disagreeable person who's going to be honest regardless, the social media thing is in the room with me a bit. With them, I don't think it is. And I think it would be with a guy like McAfee. So in a way, what we're losing, it's not just about the cable model. It's not just about the way sports are presented. It's this generational loss where we're just not going to get dudes being dudes the same way if we get younger guys, or am I overinterpreting what's going on with this?
Yeah, I think if things continue on the way that they are, and have been over the last, decade, you're probably right. But as we know, culture, everything goes in cycles. Things will go to one extreme, into the middle, on to the next. Obviously, there's a variety of different reasons why everyone operates the way that they do with, I feel like everyone is trying to be a media person these days. They're all trying to make money from media. Ethan, you have created a real business, right? Like you've created a real media business, and
an LLC,
that's thriving. But there's everyone feels they have an opportunity to be Ethan, and they're all trying to compete to be heard. And what you get is anger rises to the top, right? Like, dunking on someone rises to the top. Like that's what you get.
I mean, they could be me if they were just willing to get criticized by their peers on social media. In many instances, that's just too high a cost, I suppose, for a lot of people. I mean, I'm not even joking. I think that's real. People are very sensitive to ostracism. I'm writing some about it right now because I'm fascinated by how powerful that is. I think it's our evolutionary wiring, and I'm frustrated with my own ability or with my own inability to completely transcend it. It's bizarre to me that when I'm in a controversy that I'm not wholly unconcerned about it. I've made the necessary steps to not need the people who are mad at me to be nice to me. I have my own business. I can do what I want. I can say what I want. And every now and again, I can almost act like I don't give a fuck. But I do. There's this weird wiring when you're in a controversy and people are saying bad things about you that you do care, even if it's abstract and even if it's just out in the world. I think that's fascinating to me. Theoretically, if it's not in front of you, you shouldn't even concern yourself with it. But I've never met somebody who is completely impervious to it other than maybe Charles Barkley.
Yeah, and I mean, Charles Barkley doesn't have social media, and he has Instagram because he's promoting his alcohol line, right? So he got they convinced him to get. I wonder how much money he's getting from this. They convinced him to get on Instagram
he's doing a lot of commercials
just to promote his alcohol line. But I think for us that we're like, I know I'm a little bit older than you, but I'm the first year millennials, 1981. I remember the first phone I remember in my house was a rotary phone. Wasn't on the internet until I was 18 years old. I didn't have a cell phone until I was 18 years old. And then, smartphones didn't exist, all of that. And I think culturally what people care about, it's a little different than, people that are our age or older. I think the hard thing on social is just being able to tell yourself, if these aren't my actual friends, if these aren't my actual colleagues, if these aren't people I actually really do care about, who cares? My opinion is my opinion because it's my opinion, right? Like that's just what it is. And as long as you know that your opinion, you have the discipline to not put something up unless you've put the time and energy into learning about it. You shouldn't care what other people think. You can hear it. You can hear what they say, but as long as they're not tearing you, if they're tearing you down, who cares? You know what I do on Twitter?
What?
I tweet stuff out, and as soon as it starts getting too noisy, I hit mute on the conversation. I don't even, I'm like, doesn't even exist. I could have something that's been going controversial and people are commenting on it, and it's just commenting into the ether because I don't even see it. They could have been doing it for 6 months. But as soon as it gets to that point, I'm out of there.
Yeah, I always look at you as somebody who doesn't care because I see you having those conversations. So even if that makes sense, like the way I look at it is, well, Nate likes this because he's always tweeting and he likes getting in the mix like this. I don't like
getting in the mix. I think that as a society, though, as soon as people are, there's times where I tweet things and then all these people DM and text me, like people I respect. But they aren't in a position either because of their career or they're worried. There's a variety of reasons why they can't, that they don't say anything, right? They won't say anything. They won't jump on it. And that's what you have going on. And from my perspective, I'm like, I am in a position to where people think I'm a target that they can take down, but no one's firing me. People that like the loud person on Twitter is not going to determine if my business is successful or not. I'm good at what I'm doing. I'm confident. It's what it is. So I'm going to say what I want to say. And if you have a problem, you have a problem. That's your right. But it's not going to change how I operate. Yeah.
And I wouldn't criticize those people who speak privately but not publicly. And I'll tell you why. I think some of it is medium specific. There are times where you might be getting roasted on Twitter, and I would fully support you and go on this podcast and say this is bullshit and Nate is correct and these people are crazy. But I don't want to get involved in Twitter. That medium is terrible.
And I wouldn't want them to either. I wouldn't want them to either. I guess my point is these audiences, these people, the loudest people think that like they're all that matters. And that because they have like the favorite line of people like that is like ratio, ratio. Oh, you got ratio. And it's like, dude, I don't even know what that means. Like that doesn't matter to me. My opinion.
That's read the room. That's the read the room. The ratio. Some of you might not understand what the ratio is, but it speaks to the replies to a tweet versus the retweets. And I guess if you're getting a bunch of replies or quote tweets, it means that a bunch of people are angry at you. So you did a tweet that, oh my God, you did a tweet that people got angry at, Nate. That's not allowed. That speaks to your poor character. And man, you know what it really means? It means that you're a nerd, bro. That's what it means. You said the nerd thing. So that's another aspect of this that's so interesting is that there is a component. God, I wish I had written this down, man. I actually did write it down because I am writing about a piece about criticism and kind of my idea about criticism capture, where criticism does truly have an influence on how creators operate. And it's something to navigate in the way that audience capture is something to navigate. Well, this is not exactly great podcasting, but you said something and I want to present it to you because I want to see if this is a real thing or if we're being self-serving here about the kind of person who dogpiles and gets angriest, but is in a way a media person. So maybe Maze will have to cut out my search. Okay, here it is. Okay, here it is. And I would never say something so mean. This is just Nate, people. So you just know that. My favorite class of folks on here are the guys that wanted to be writers, couldn't make it, mainly because they sucked at it, and then became holier than thou antagonist types on Twitter. I saw that tweet. I pumped my fist. My heart swelled in agreement. And then I thought, Nate, is that too self-serving? Is that too self-serving for guys like us to look at that and go, man, these people are so mad at me. I've got these enemies because they're failures and they're just filled with resentment over how much we've thrived, Nate. So I don't know. I'll throw that one out there for you.
It's funny because people are always like, well, just because you're a successful media person, I'm like, I don't work in media. I'm not a writer. What are you talking about? Like,
Yep.
This is just something that I've noticed. I've noticed the cohort of people that have gone from, having whatever platform that they were on that they were getting paid for, and that kind of went away, or they didn't take off the way that they wanted to. And their Twitter has just been, it's like, how do you get attention if you don't have that going for you anymore? You got to stir up shit all the time, know. So
to be somewhat sympathetic, I do think there's a cohort of people who would have been good and productive, but let's be real about it. The industry has shrunk. It's not
100%.
It's not an environment that cultivates and develops talent anymore. I say all the time, because sometimes people send me emails. Somebody in college will say, how do I get to do a job in sports media? And I would say to them, look, I don't know what to tell you, because the way it's gone like this, I climbed a ladder to success, and then the ladder disintegrated as though disintegrated by Thanos or whatever the hell he's called. I don't watch the comic book movies.
Same, I don't either.
I don't know. Thanos. I mean, Maze always gives me shit whenever I say it wrong. But the ladder went away. The ladder I climbed to success went away. And then what happened afterwards is that the floor that I climbed the ladder to disintegrated. So I don't know what to tell you guys other than be good, be hungry, look for opportunities, be self-motivated. Jason Timpf was on my podcast. He built himself up on YouTube, working extraordinarily hard. There are opportunities out there. I don't want to be a doomer. I just want to be real that the industry has fallen apart. And so in the wake of that, there's going to be a cohort of people who would have washed out in any industry, but there's going to be a cohort of people who maybe reasonably expected that they could have a job and have a function, and now they don't, and they're angry. And I get that. Even though they're my enemy and they wish ill upon me, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very reasonable way to look at it, and I agree 100%. I think two things. Number one, we're in a time and an era where you have to have some kind of entrepreneurial spirit to you. You have to have some kind of hustle to you, right? And I don't want to come off like Gary Vee or whatever else, but like, you either have it or you don't. Some people have it and they don't, or it's the entrepreneurial business sense plus like a marketing aspect. Like those are the people that take off. They get it. They're like, this is, I look at a guy like Bomani. Bomani was grassroots to start.
Yeah.
And then he got on to ESPN and whatever else. But I remember I knew Bomani from social media before I knew him as a, media person himself. And he put himself out there. He cultivated an audience, and it's grown with him. And as you've seen on this podcast, when he comes on your podcast, these people follow him everywhere. So this guy's been putting in that time, that effort, that work. And not everyone is built like that. So, the stuff what you described, the lane you described of, I don't have to be entrepreneurial, I don't have to think like that at all, is gone. And it does suck for some people, but that also is life. Life is constant. Like things are constantly changing. How do you think factory workers that worked at factories forever and all of a sudden those things are taken away? They don't just give up on life. They figure out what the next thing is. And maybe some of them are angry and it turns into whatever else, but I don't think that's the way to necessarily go about doing things. You got to
I totally agree. In general, what I want to impress upon my sons is that you're not always responsible for the situation that you're in, but you are responsible for making the best choice from that point.
Yes.
You can't just go, this sucks, it's time to wallow. And Bomani, after I got fired by ESPN, called me up and he said, look, you got fired. I've been fired many times. I'll be fired again. It's not a big deal. And then he went on the set to do whatever show he was going to do. And that was the proper attitude of, okay, now this feels like a big deal right now, but I've got to move forward and not make my life about this one moment. But Yeah, it's angry. It's an angry place, man, and their level of anger is just something that is very odd to me. I guess I just lack a theory of mind sometimes in dealing with that. I can't imagine myself just getting publicly enraged over an article I didn't read, for instance, or kind of sort of joining the online mob in this sort of way. But I'm not like some other people, and some other people do things differently, and I guess I just have to account for that.
So a question I have though is how many people are actually authentically and truly angry in a lot of these instances? Because I think a lot of it is just this. It's just this is my way of getting attention versus like this is the way I actually feel.
That's why I show up to Summer League. That's why I show up to Summer League. I want to know, like, okay, which one of you, like, walk in the media room? Which one of you which one of you really's got a bad opinion? You were talking like you did, but which one of you's got one? Okay, Maze wants to give us some shit, possibly. He says we're having a holier than thou conversation.
Come on, Maze, dump on us.
Well, the holier than thou is I don't watch Marvel and I don't read comments. And
that's what I offended you with.
Stuff. No, you didn't offend me. It's just like, well, that's beneath me to know how to pronounce Thanos.
Okay, to be clear, it's not beneath me.
Thanos.
I just don't know. That's all I'm saying. I don't know about Harry Potter. My wife knows all about Harry Potter. I know nothing about it. There are vast aspects of culture that even if I secretly believe to be above them, I'm not publicly above them is my position.
It's pretty clear that you feel like you're above them and that people who like Harry Potter, even though it's your wife, might not necessarily be worth your time. But
I mean,
in terms of people being angry on the internet, yes, almost every time someone has complained about, for instance, when I make a Cinephobe episode 2 parts because it's so long that I don't have time to edit the whole thing, people don't like 2-parters, and then I'll explain to them, hey, it's twice as much work in the same amount of time, and I do this for my own sanity. They're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. It's because you can verbally or textually project your displeasure out into the void, and there's no repercussions. What's going to happen to you if you complain about something? If you complain about Nate's tweet or about Ethan's...
My lawyers, I will sick my lawyers on you people. You cannot...
W Pacers comment. Like, what are you going to do about it?
That's one where my neighbor brought it up, actually. That one apparently went big enough that my neighbor, who's a big Pacers fan... Big Pacers fan. He brought that one. He just thought it was funny. He was like, "Where can I get my W Pacers jersey?" Which, by the way, you don't think the Caitlin Clark Pacers jersey would do numbers? You don't think that's flying off the shelves? I'm just saying. I'm not backing down on this very niche take. I think they should do it regardless. You don't have to change the name of the team to have one of those. I mean, Nate's thinking about it.
I'm laughing because it's just funny to me that you brought up something that is just so harmless and people had to like make you seem like you're like the worst person ever. And it's just like, dude, he had a suggestion. The easiest thing to do. This is my approach to everything on social. I hear what you're saying. I disagree with you. And here's why. It's so simple just to approach things that way. But instead, it gets personal. And they have animus for you for probably a variety of reasons. And they're just like, this is an opportunity to prove he is this horrible person that I told you he was. Like, see, here he goes again, right? Like,
which in a way they're not wrong about. I mean, I probably am from their perspective bad because they've got a very narrow understanding of what constitutes a good person. I would agree with, but it is funny. It's this, like, when I'm in a controversy like that, Nate, I'm being accused of being bad because I said that maybe the NBA should have named their WNBA teams the same as the NBA teams in the cities. I'll think, no, I've said like 1,000 more sexist things than that. I mean, that's very low end.
Yeah.
I've done so much worse. So in a way, they're right. In a way, I probably am bad. I don't know, but I also think that's a strange one to make the case with.
Yeah, I just think there is just such an easier way to go about. I feel like I'm able to I actually have conversations on Twitter with people from all walks of life because I approach them in that way. I don't go, "Oh, you're an idiot." I think that's like the default is to be combative. And even when someone comes at me combative, I try to calm it down. If they still go down that, then I just block them or mute them or whatever. But like, there's a way to connect with people, and it's not from coming at them aggressively. You just say, hey, like, this is my perspective. It's different than yours. It's that easy. This is the reason I said that. You might disagree, but boom, that's it. People are, for some reason, folks aren't wired that way. And I don't know if it's just our natural like state, if it's the incentives on the platform itself, or people are just being disingenuous and, trollish. Like, maybe it's a combination of all of those things.
You know what depressed me to that end, guys? And it's weird that it depressed me. I was depressed by the backlash to Austin Rivers' claim that there were 30 NBA players who could play NFL, because it was such a low stakes claim to me. And I believe it's probably pretty true. And he didn't say I could have played in the NFL.
He did not.
It's just something he said. And it got so vicious and personal in the back and forth with the NFL players and him that it just had me going, bro, this isn't even about politics or something where people get irrational about it. And this is ugly, where I think it was it James Jones? I don't know the name on Fox Sports, who was going after Rivers, and then Rivers does a very nasty response to Jones over how his career meant nothing and he didn't make any money. And I'm just looking at it. I'm going, man, we just can't have normal takes anymore. What's going on?
Rivers is like the perfect person for that situation, because people just assume the only reason he played in the NBA is because of his dad. So I think a lot of the vitriol that he received in that is like, why are you even talking? Even though we know Austin Rivers was the best high school player in his class. He went to Duke. He was the leading scorer. Like, he's got all these things that he did to end up in the place that he ended up. And he played 11 years in the league and whatever else. What would have been nice is if Austin was either like internally able to manage this enough and came back with just the chillest response and did not like go after this guy at all. Right. Like, just kind of like, this is what it is. This is the reason I said this. This is where it comes from, and left it at that. But like, I don't know if he's incentivized to do that. Like, it doesn't make sense for in our current media landscape for him to actually like operate in that way.
He should have done a self-deprecating show up at one of the football team's OTAs trying to make the team kind of video.
Chad Powers.
That's what Amin would have done.
Chad Powers.
That's what Amin would have done.
Yeah. Amin's good at that. Amin is built different, man. He doesn't ignore the hate like Chuck does, but he almost thrives on it. And it's this energy that he converts into a different kind of resource. I feel that probably would have been the better way to handle it for Rivers. I just also thought it was just kind of silly. I mean, I think it's true. I think it's just about economics. That's my position. We're having a take on this take that is still going, by the way. An NFL player on television confronted Austin Rivers about how disrespectful his take was. That take is completely correct. It's just about money and about status. If you want to make more money and be more famous, the NBA is the place to do that. So there's going to be a cohort of athletes who will play NBA because they're not going to get broken, and they're going to get more famous, and they're going to make more money. So they're going to play in the NBA rather than go to the NFL. And I just think that's how it goes.
The injury aspect of it is just like the part that is just completely left out. Like, you could make more money and not get hurt, and guaranteed money and not get hurt. Of course you're gonna choose the other. It's like, when they would have these football versus baseball choices, like, why did this quarterback all of a sudden become a baseball player? Because he's never going to get hit.
That's how much the Oakland A's suck, by the way, that Kyler Murray decided instead of playing for the A's to become a quarterback and get chased around. But in all seriousness, I think quarterback's the different one, because with quarterback, the status and the money is like enough that, and they protect the quarterbacks now more these days than when Charlie Ward decided to play for the Knicks. I don't know if Charlie Ward could have even played in the NFL. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah, I mean, what was funny about it to me was that the NFL players lashing out at Austin Rivers were making his case for him in a way that they didn't seem to really grasp. Because they would go, you think you could play in the NFL? You think that NBA players could handle this training camp where they abuse us and it's 120 degrees and you don't get paid money and the coach is screaming at you? And I'm looking like, yeah, that's why they're playing in the NBA, even though they're good enough to play in your league. That's why.
Yeah, and if they didn't have the choice to play in the NBA, yeah, they would put themselves through that, because they'd have to make a living. What other thing could they do to make that much money? Of course they would do it. So
well, now this is the conversation of which guys. I think Anthony Edwards, I don't know what he would play. I feel like he loves football. I'm not sure what position, but tight end is like the default for NBA guys. Like there's been a lot of former college basketball players that were excellent tight ends. So I think that's the space that you would most commonly see some of these athletic guys end up at. I think LeBron played tight end, right? Or was he a receiver? I would love to see, I think he was a receiver, but he would probably project as a tight end. I would love to see Jokic as a 7 foot tall, extremely bored left tackle who he hates his job even more than he does at the NBA level, which you don't buy, by the way. Nate thinks that Jokic is lying to all of us about how much he hates his job.
He doesn't hate. That's absolute crap. You cannot be brilliant in the way that he's brilliant in basketball without loving it. You can't. I
disagree.
I think that you can be, just from being around, there's guys that can put the ball in the basket that don't love it, but he has a creativity to his game that does not develop without a pure love of the game. I don't think there's ever been a creative player on his level that hasn't been a gigantic fan of the game. And that's not to say that he doesn't love horses more, but he fucking loves basketball. There is no doubt about that in my mind.
I mean, I think about the opening scene of The Bear, which really hit for me as a creative person, as a producer, as someone who's turned something they like into something that is their job, which is just because I love something doesn't make it fun. And I think Jokic might love being competitive, and I think he might love playing basketball, but I don't think it's fun for him to go to work every day and hoop. That's the difference. And it's like, when you do something long enough, when you do something as a career, when it consumes your life, it loses some fun. I mean, Anthony Edwards is the complete opposite, right? He's clearly having fun. He's having the time of his life. And I don't think Jokic does. And I like that. I respect that. I connect with that. While it might not be marketable and fun for the league, it's fun for me as a tortured artist who understands that, like, just because you're good at something and you have to do it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best time.
Maze is onto something there. And I'm reminded of how many great writers, top tier writers, hate writing and are perhaps at their most eloquent when describing how much they hate writing, how much they dread it. Michael Moynihan has been on the podcast, talked about it. I don't have the examples ready, but at one point in the Fifth Column podcast, he rattled off a bunch of famous, incredible writers who hate writing, which I don't feel that way about writing. So I was surprised to hear that, but that's a thing. I think there are people who love doing the thing, and there are people who love having done the thing. And maybe Jokic is a guy who loves having done the thing and finds fulfillment in that. I also wonder, is that love of the horses reciprocated when Jokic gets in the carriage, I feel like the horse has to be going, oh my God, no. No.
Not this big ass dude again.
Not this guy. Oh my God. Why couldn't I be loved by a 5-foot human? This is terrible.
Yeah. I just, you're able to snuff out players that just don't care about the game. Just me personally, like when being around these guys, like you're able to snuff. Usually you're able to see that. The interesting thing with Jokic that I think is going to tell the story, unless he has an injury or something like that, will be how long he plays. If he's a guy that does not care, he's just gonna be like, I made my money. I got a few MVPs. I'm good. What do I need? What do I need to do this for? I'm gone. Right. But if this guy's around, if this guy is around for 20 years, that whole act is bullshit. Like there is no way he's sticking around for, 18, 19, 20 years unless he actually loves it. I guarantee after games, he's texting people pissed off when they fucking lose, he just doesn't show any of that stuff. But I guarantee that dude is doing all that. It's hilarious to see the memes and the videos and things that people make up to. I saw a comedian do something around Jokic's day. But I hate Job. I think it's impossible for him. I hate it. Yeah, that's exactly.
But basketball is Job. I hate Job.
Yeah,
I feel bad about the Nuggets losing. I feel emotionally impacted by the Nuggets losing in the playoffs, even though I'm not a Nuggets fan. And even if I really love the Wolves and their story, but I don't like that it's going to come back to questioning him and too many MVPs and everything else. I feel like Malone really screwed it up, guys. I feel like he really. I've been playing him 47 minutes. I
don't know if so much that is Malone is, the GM didn't put them in a position to be able to, this is what you're going to see from now on. We've got this second apron thing. Teams are worried about, tax dollars, flexibility, how much money they have. So you're going to start to see. So as we were talking about earlier with the, ESPN forcing the Lakers or whatever else, I wonder if this new system is going to hack us getting into a place of us seeing a variety of different teams, even if the NBA or even if ESPN or a broadcast partner wants to put other people on, it's the NBA is trying to become more NFL. And this system is kind of like the first time where we actually really have a chance because it's almost like you have 3 to 5 years to like attempt to get to the mountaintop. And after that, everything's going to get too expensive. You can keep your, maybe 1 or 2 guys, but you're going to rebuild around them.
I don't like it. Yeah, I don't love it. I think sometimes the NBA copies the aspects of the NFL that I don't think need to be copied, where what makes the NFL so popular? It's this replay review they have. That's the reason that they're so popular. That's what we need to have. We need replay review. No, that has nothing to do with why people watch NFL football, and you're going to undermine your sport by trying to make it like them. The NFL and their parody is appealing in part because the quarterbacks, I do think, represent this anchor that gives you an expectation of how good teams are. And so there's a little nice mix between the parody and the quarterbacks, but you can completely change your team in one draft, and you don't need the top pick to do it. The NBA is a different beast. You can't completely change your fortunes with one draft, and you almost certainly can't unless you've got a high pick. There are exceptions, Jokic being one of them, but for the most part, that's how it is. And so I don't know if I love the lack of continuity. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what I think because the league's just going to progress how it progresses. But I wanted to see some Nuggets. I wanted to see a Nuggets run here or there, and it bums me out if they're knocked off their pedestal. But I guess it's okay because we're seeing the Wolves, and maybe the Celtics are going to mount something. Okay, we'll end on this. What the hell do I make of these Celtics? These Celtics who had the most impressive regular season, but people might even debate that they lack a superstar. Somebody could make that argument. That would be a plausible argument to make. So they have the best regular season team. They have all these expectations. They don't have a guy somebody would argue is a top 4 player. And they seem to disappoint people and nobody seems to believe in them, even though they are totally favored in the Eastern Conference Finals after saving their bacon from what looked like a certain loss that Tyrese Halliburton fumbled away. That's the thing. The basketball question will end on Celtics. What do I make of this team?
I think the Celtics are a great team, but there are certain things that it just isn't in their DNA. And you were talking about ESPN just kind of does the same thing over and over again. It's like debate show. This is what we do. This is what we do. This is what we do. And it works and we're going to do it no matter what. And the Celtics are kind of that way. We pass the ball around and get good open threes, even though sometimes in playoff games, it's rough and tumble and somebody's got to get to the basket, get to the basket, get to the foul line, especially, last night they're playing the Pacers who want to get up and down the floor. If anything, you should be trying to put it into their chest, put them into the rim, like all of that. Jaylen Brown's probably the one guy on that team that has that mentality and the capability of doing it. I would think Tatum would have the same. I always look at Tatum and, I kind of think of him in almost he should be similar to what Shea is as a guard. You've got this slim, tall guy that's got broad shoulders and should be able to get and long arms and should be able to get anywhere he wants, be able to get his mid-range shot off anytime he wants, be able to get to the rim anytime he wants. And he plays the opposite of that. That's not his game. His game is he very much floats into, I'm going to shoot jumpers and step backs. And it's a tool that you should have, but I don't know if it's necessarily something that you should always be going into with his figure, his size, his ability, especially in those tight, close moments. It's something that he should be diving more into that aspect. I think that's where they get in trouble.
Yeah, that's the only analysis of basketball that you will get on the House of Strauss podcast for the next 6 months. So appreciate it, folks. It's funny. It is very NBA anchor, but not necessarily about what happens on the floor necessarily. Though I remain a fan. I'm like Jokic in a way. I pretend to not love it, but I can't help it. I can't help but getting drawn in. This has been fantastic. Anything? Did we cover everything? Was there any topic, Nate? I think we started a conversation before the podcast on what guest I should have. What guest makes you most excited if I get them on this podcast? That's what I'll throw out to you to end on.
Honestly, I just, I'm a curious person to begin with, so I just like anyone that's talking about things that I am not familiar with and I don't know about. So
Michael Porter Jr. then.
I have not listened to Mike MPJ's pod. I've heard people's commentary on it, so I assume that he's got some off the wall stuff. There was
curious, Mike.
Some porn star stuff on there as well. But I think giving it seems like you put people on that you're interested in. You want to hear their story. You read their book. This is that you read you read an article about them doing this, and you're like, let me see if they want to come on the pod. I think that is super valuable because obviously your Substack is itself is rooted in sports media commentary and controversy and things of that nature, and you're giving your thoughts and experiences on all of that. But then it's like you're getting a nice surprise treat with these things that aren't necessarily always sports oriented. That's my favorite, being able to open it up and listen to someone that I'm just like, wow, I didn't even realize that was something I would be interested in.
I thought that you would mention Rob Henderson. Rob Henderson.
I love Rob. I mean, that's a perfect example. He's just things that has nothing to do with sports, but he's got an inspiring story and he's obviously really intelligent and has a lot of insightful thoughts and theories.
Mays wants me to have Brock Purdy on. I think that would be the guy that would be most exciting.
I think you, Brock, and that Christian YouTuber should get together and have a chat.
I'm very interested that there was somebody who's got a very big Christianity focused YouTube who became aware of me via my Grant Cohn conversation about the Niners. And it's just always interesting to see what hobbies connect the world. Anyway, actually, that's a legit question. Who do you want? Who do you want on this program, Maze? Who should I get? I can't get Brock. I don't think I can get him. And frankly, I don't think it'd be very exciting if I got him.
I mean, in terms of somebody that we haven't had, I think you need to go more comedians.
I
want to see Ethan dip his toes into the comedian world. Every day I find out about a new comedian, so there's a never-ending supply. I think we can get into that space.
I think so as well.
I want you to have Mark Shapiro on.
Mark Shapiro, that would be very interesting. That's a pretty good idea there.
He's had a very interesting career, and like I feel like he can talk freely about ESPN now that he's not actually there and dealing with them. He's the one that started this shit to begin with, so I'm sure he probably has lots of thoughts.
Him and David Stern, man, just toxic from the beginning of ESPN's relationship with the NBA, with Stern trying to maneuver around him to Iger, and it was all rooted in the W. We didn't even really talk about that situation with Caitlin Clark and the Fever being bad. I don't know. Maybe next time. I can only average so many WNBA controversies. Women's basketball has not been kind to me in general, it would appear. So we will table that for a different date. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much, Nate. What do you want to plug for us?
What I want to plug is my athletic insole startup, Move Insoles, at Move Insoles on all across social, moveinsoles.com or move.one to check us out.
I would concur with that.